Test. Nice. That one's good too? Test.
And we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Okay, Celeste, any agenda?
Hello. Hello.
Any agenda changes?
Only one added this morning for the financials,
Okay.
professional services agreement.
Yep. All right. Next, we move on to privilege of the floor. The board encourages public participation at board meetings during a specific portion of the agenda entitled Privilege of the Floor, Public Comment. The public comment section is not the time or place to register complaints about individuals or items that have not first been addressed through proper channels with those closest to the issue, such as a teacher, the building principal, the superintendent, or other appropriate party. Individuals making statements during privilege of the floor are expected to be courteous and respectful, modeling for our students how one can participate and have their voice heard in situations where there is agreement or disagreement with others' views. If members of the public have gone through proper channels and still wish to discuss a matter with the board, they can submit their comments in writing to the board clerk. At its discretion, the board may invite visitors to its meetings to participate in the board's discussion of matters on the agenda. The public comment section is an opportunity for residents and residents only to address the Board of Education. Public comment should take place only in the portion of the agenda designated. This is usually at the beginning of each meeting. Persons wishing to address the board must indicate their desire to speak in advance on the sign-in sheet. Because the board typically has many business items on its agenda, speakers must confine their comments to 3 minutes. The board will not address specific questions, comments, but may ask for your name and contact information in the event follow-up is necessary. The board will not permit in public session discussion involving individual personnel or students. Persons wishing to discuss matters involving individual personnel or students should present their comments and/or concerns to the superintendent, who will share them with the board at the next executive session. Okay, and it looks like we have a couple of people that wish to speak. So when I call your name, please come down to the microphone. And the first person is Deanna Fox.
Hello, thank you. Two quick things I wanted to address. The first one was today's 2-hour delay. There was a concerning amount of people that did not receive any notification that there was a 2-hour delay today. I myself didn't even know there was a 2-hour delay until my former editor at the Times Union called me wondering why there was a 2-hour delay. So the news media knew before the residents did, and that's never a good thing. So hopefully that can be addressed. The second thing I wanted to bring up was the new Wi-Fi policy that the school is initiating. I think it's really important that teachers be given every opportunity to instruct students without distraction. It's hard enough what they're doing already. However, there's a couple of issues that came to mind about how problematic this new policy is. The first thing is, and this was something I was planning to email privately about, but because equity seems to be such a big part of the board's mission, I think it's important to address it to the board. So the first thing is just the equity behind it. Not every student can afford a cell phone or to have cell service on their cell phone if they have them. So I think it's a big dividing line, an issue of equity there. You know, the equity, I think rural school districts have the unique capacity to become hubs of their community, or not even the opportunity or the capacity, they just are. There's nothing else. So being able to let your kids sit in your car in the parking lot while waiting for a sibling at a sport event or something where they can do homework, I think is important. So I don't know if it's possible to meter when the Wi-Fi is turned on, if it's after school hours. But that doesn't really address the issue of equity and making sure that all kids um, have Wi-Fi that they can use. Beyond that, it seems like there's a discrepancy in school policy about people being able to use their phones during non-instructional time, and if they don't have Wi-Fi service, they might not be able to do that. Also, there's a continued breakdown in communication between the school and families. And I know for my kids who are active and involved, I'm usually not finding out about changes to scheduling until minutes before it's happening. It's not coming from their coaches, it's rarely coming from teachers. It's usually coming from my kid texting frantically that basketball practice has been canceled or changed and not knowing if they need to ride the bus or if they're being picked up. And cell phone service is really bad in this school, so having Wi-Fi. Thank you, 30 seconds. Okay, the last one is that in my PTA role, school adjacent groups like the PTA need Wi-Fi when we have events. I don't even know how we're going to be able to do our movie night on Saturday if we don't have Wi-Fi. So I think the policy is just flawed. It's tricky because teachers need fewer distractions in the classrooms, but I don't know if this is the right way to handle that. So thank you.
Okay, the next person who indicated they wished to speak is Christina Lukides.
That other one was kind of awful. Yeah. Ooh. Hi, Christina Lukides. I want to thank the board and staff for last month's presentation on the hierarchy of services that exist to address the learning needs of students. It's important to see how the school works to ensure that all students' educational needs are met. I'd also like to address the current notion of parental control or involvement over their children's education. We've heard that more time should be devoted to academics and less to attending to students' social needs. Academics continue to be the primary focus of any school, and more on that in a bit. But providing for the social needs grew out of essentially two things. One, the continued incidence of horrific, deadly events that happen in schools by students who feel isolated or targeted by their peers. And two, increased bullying and requests by parents and kids to do something about it. These things force schools to respond with programs that promote mutual understanding and at the very least a tolerance of the differences in each of us. The goal of these programs is to simply let kids live and let live safely in a public space, and what's wrong with that? And they do not dominate the main focus of the school, which is academic growth. Now academics. There is an idea being promoted that parents have limited control or involvement over their kids' education, that the school controls it all. I'm concerned that there is a move to convince parents they lack control when, in truth, parents have complete control over their children's education. Not the curricula, because we're not qualified for that in the same way I'm not qualified to tell a mechanic how to fix my car or a dentist how to extract a tooth. But as parents, we completely control how we make our kids ready to learn. Our involvement and control exists in how we teach our children their work ethic, resilience, curiosity, and a sense of responsibility for their job, which is to do well in school. We set aside a space for homework and studying and check that this is being done. We ask them to explain their assignments and help them develop a sense of pride in their work. We set expectations for achievement that fit the child, encourage and acknowledge successes, and set consequences when needed. We can access New York State learning standards to see the scope of academics, read report cards, and track assignments on the parent portal. And we can recognize that performance is linked to how we helped our children develop responsibility and accountability. This is nothing new and is known by every parent. What is new is people trying to convince parents that they don't have control or involvement in their children's learning because of school programming. Why are people actively telling parents they don't control or are involved in learning? This concerns me because we as parents have the job of ensuring that our children are ready to learn, and we can talk with our children about what they are learning and foster or negate any of it through our actions at home. I hope that parents evaluate this notion of control and realize that we are the foundation of our children's learning, that the school is there to effectively teach the curricula in a safe, welcoming environment, and that we both have a role in how our children grow into responsible, motivated, self-reliant, and open-minded adults. Thank you. I'm sorry I went over. Thank you.
All right, those are all the people that indicated they wish to speak. Is there anyone who didn't sign in that would like to speak? Okay. Moving on to reports. Um, First up, we have Mike Gauthier.
Okay, so um, I'm the advisor for the robotics club. We do a very large competition once a year, as we primarily do prep for it the beginning half of the school year, and then come January, so like last Saturday, we found out what our competition is going to be. Now we have to build a robot in about 12 weeks that's going to play a very competitive game, and this is a competition called First Robotics, and about I think the number is there's like 3,700 teams that are competing throughout the world. We're going to go to an event that has about 48 teams, a lot of local teams, some international teams, and our event's going to be in like the first or second week of April, and it's going to be at the MVP Arena. So we got the club put a presentation together. This is the members. We got Tyler, Jade, Declan, and Matthew. Matthew's been on the team the longest. I think the robotics team's been around for 5 years. We had to take a break in the middle there, like everybody else did during the pandemic, but we're doing it for 5 years. So let's see. So this is we did some quotes. This quote is from the president of the club, Steve. He couldn't make it tonight because he's working. He was actually one of the founding members. He started in 7th grade. Now he's a senior, and so it's pretty awesome. Actually, Debbie started 8 years. So it's opened up a lot of opportunities for him. He has had this last year. Vince not here is a robot from last year. We brought it today, right here. And it's a lot different. We had to take a lot of parts off. You can see there's parts at the top there, but we took it apart because we're going to use some of the parts. We have to get it ready for this new season. Okay. This is a student. This is Ryan. He's not here tonight, but he moved here 2 years ago, and quickly, joined the club, became part of the group, and he does all our programming. He's our lead programmer. Works with a friend of mine who's a retired engineer from GE, and he teaches to do the programming. So Ryan's doing that, really working with him a lot to get up to speed on how to control these robots. Tyler, you wanna read yours off? You can read right here.
Being in robotics can connect people and is an opportunity to experience cooperation at new levels. Robotics allows people to experience with new technologies. People work around the clock to build up a fully functioning robot and go head to head against other robots from other schools. I myself have had the opportunity to experience new tools and have been able to contribute and help build robots. I've been in robotics for 3 years and it has really changed my life and has gotten me interested in technology for the future.
Awesome. Okay. This is Jacob. He's not here tonight, but he just started this year. Really excited. 11th grade. Wish he started earlier. He's already liking it, but he went with us. We went on Saturday to find out what our game was. So this is a picture of us all with our kit of parts. That's what you get. You get a crate, a couple boxes, and you just hope you can figure it out. This is a good picture of a couple of the kids learning how to use a manual machine lathe. They had to make I think they were making some pullets for one of the projects, for one of the mechanisms on top of the robot. So this is Jesse. He's learned problem solving, mechanical engineering, and a lot done this, now they want to pursue schooling in engineering or programming, things like that. Keegan, he wants to pursue this when he goes to college. He's big into CAD, drawing all the parts on the computer first so that we can see how they work. And Keegan is another one. He's been doing this since 7th grade, right, Matthew? You guys started in 7th grade? Keegan? Yeah. Started in 7th grade, and we've been going through, and they've been just working on it ever since, so pretty cool. Matthew, I think you did this one. You want to read this one off?
Yeah, I didn't really know it was a quote thing.
That's okay.
Robotics in the school is different from most. In many schools, students have to pay to participate. Some students aren't allowed in. If we were one of these schools, many of us would not be able to have this opportunity. At robotics, we build skills of everyone, some from ground up, and is definitely one of the best opportunities the school has to offer.
So to elaborate that on a little more, we go to these competitions, and a lot of kids from other schools, they're almost, their jaws almost drop when we see we've got 7th and 8th graders working on these robots, because a lot of schools it's not until you're in 11th, 12th grade that you're able to work. And so what's awesome about being in a small school is we're able to do that, and we can safely say that all of the kids on our team work on the robot. It's not just give ideas. So that's pretty cool too. So I wanted to show real quick. Let's see. Declan, you want to explain what this is? Declan and Jay, do you want to explain what this is?
All right.
This
so
video?
This is our competition this year. Basically, it's made by this company, and of course, we make a robot to solve this. And does the video play?
Yeah, we'll play it. So this is what we get. So we get this video and about a 300-page manual. And it goes over the rules, how to program, all that stuff is in there, and we have to just figure it out. So we'll play this and see if it works.
Welcome to the 2023 First Robotics Competition game, Charged Up, presented by Haas.
Two alliances of 3 teams each compete to score cubes and cones into their grid to charge up their community. The alliances earn additional points if their robots are docked to or engaged with their charge station. Robots start each match in their community and may be preloaded with either 1 cube or 1 cone. Each alliance may choose where to stage 4 additional game pieces. During the first 15 seconds of the match, robots are autonomous. Without guidance from their drivers, robots score preloaded game pieces, collect and score additional game pieces, and are docked to or engaged with their charge station. Charge station points earned during auto count towards a potential activation bonus. The grid has nodes specific to cones and cubes, and some where either a cone or cube can be scored. During the remaining 2 minutes and 15 seconds, drivers control their robots. Robots continue to collect cubes and cones from human players at their substations to deliver power to the grids in their community. Each community contains 3 grids. The center grid is the cooperation grid. A link is a line of 3 game pieces scored on the same row. Completing enough links earns the alliance a sustainability bonus. If each alliance scores at least 3 game pieces in the cooperation grid, the sustainability bonus threshold is lowered for both alliances. Robots are protected within their community and loading zones. As time runs out, robots race to their charge stations. Alliances earn points for each robot docked to or engaged with the charge station. Earning enough charge station points earns the alliance the activation bonus. The alliance that earns the most points wins the match.
Robots can be up to 3 feet wide. So if everybody does that, they don't
and that is where we did all of our work. And to enter, you had to have safety goggles on and
Uh-huh.
your mask.
So if
You couldn't
anybody,
go anywhere without the mask.
so if somebody here wanted to go, they could go into the pit, put safety goggles on, and see what things are like, right?
Yeah.
Yep. Spectators are really encouraged, and
Yeah.
it's
Can you talk about do they call it like cooperation, that piece of the
That
puzzle?
is,
Where
okay.
you get all three on the ramp.
Yeah.
So if say you are in the pit and you don't have a part that you need, what happens?
You can ask around, and most teams are usually willing to give any parts if they have extra pieces. And if they don't, then they have a shop that you can go to for
Yep.
parts, but you have to pay. So usually you try to ask around first.
Yeah, we actually, so our robot had some issues last year, and a lot of things broke. And a team came around, this is actually, I forget what team it was exactly, but they came around and they were looking for a very specific piece. And they were looking for a bearing. And we knew that inside one of our motors, which was now broken, that bearing was there. So a couple of students, we tore it all apart, and we gave them that one little piece, and they were able to compete, and their robot did what they needed to do. So all the teams do things like that. You know, like you put it out there, you find stuff. It's a pretty cool experience. So just real quick, the event is 3 days. We do 1 day of just getting the robot ready and passing inspection. We're usually like last minute. These are long days. We're looking at like 10-hour days. And then we do a day of all heats where we compete and we get ranked. And then the last day, the second half of the day, they do the top 8 teams get to pick 2 more teams to be on their alliance. So it's all this teamwork. The whole time it's just teamwork. So yeah, you're working on your individual rank, but you're also working together to get there. And in the end, there's not one winner. There's 3 winners because you get picked on an alliance. So it's pretty neat. And everybody, all the kids network with all the other students, and it's a very cool experience. Now, this question I have for you 4 is, how much of the robot do you think I do? Me and George. George is the engineer that comes in and helps us out. How much do you think we do? How much do you do as students compared to what you see other teams do?
Planning, building, like what do you mean?
Like when you go to the competition and you see some of the robots being fixed, who's usually fixing those robots?
The dads.
The dads.
Shenenda Hoa dads.
Okay, so, and then, and that's something that I know I pride on with this, is I make the kids do it as much as they can. And we've always done that, and it will always be that way where the kids are building it. There's nothing in the rules that says you can't take your plans and give it to an engineering company to build it, and then you compete with it. Nothing in the rules that says you can't do that. So we're not going to be that team. So we definitely try our hardest to have 100% student built. Thank you for giving us. And definitely after April, we'd love to come back to quickly demo it too, because it'll be pretty neat. Yeah, when it's done, so you see what we're starting to hear. We can't use these specific parts, but it's going to look pretty much like this at the base, and then we'll add stuff on top. Anybody else have anything else to add?
This is just one of my favorite things as First Robotics. I love how the entire thing is constructed. It's just a great program, and I've been working. Every place I've gone, I've worked with a First Robotics team, so I was very excited that we had one already here, and also very excited that we had one where the students actually did the building, because I have seen that, and while they might win the competition, they haven't learned as much as students who actually have their hands on stuff. So I commend you for that. So good luck.
I think we're all set. Right, that's right.
No Shenenda Hoa dads.
Okay, next up, we have a report from the Assistant Superintendent of Management Services.
Hello? All right, good. Okay. All right, so tonight we'll do a quick little budget overview of how the 23-24 budget might look like from this point forward. The budget process has started, so there's some things that are starting to work in. And from this standpoint, this is actually like the earliest I think I've ever talked about the budget. So here it is, January 10th. Last year we talked about it towards the end of January. But we'll give it a go from what we know right now at this point. So first off, we'll talk about our mission.
Yeah, so I think it's important to know that whenever we start building a budget, we're looking at our strategic plan that the board put together and also our mission. And so these are the things that we say we are for, and then the budget is how we operationalize those things that we are for. And so that's always the place that we start.
So that being said, some of the priorities that we can think of right off the bat are to maintain existing programs, to overcome the health insurance increase possibilities, to prepare for a fiscal cliff in the future, and budgets after that federal aid, those ARPA funds that came through that will be dying off after the 23-24 school year, to continue with our staff development initiatives, and to continue also to improve in building safety. We've done some projects already, and we want to continue that. To maintain support of student health and wellness. This was also mentioned in the governor's address this afternoon. So looking at the budget, as I've tinkered around with some things already, it looks like some of our challenges could be that fiscal cliff of state aid that may fall off in the future, and then the inflation factor that we've seen since last year and hasn't really stopped or leveled out. And with those things that we see, they could affect things like the costs of instructional program and our contractual obligations, insurances, not only health insurance, but also building insurance, cyber insurance, insurance for our buses. Retirement systems will continue to go up. Fuel costs, as we've seen, fuel costs this year just continue to stay high, and just recently have gone up again. Maintenance costs for the building have gone up, along with maintenance costs for our transportation buses. For instance, I'll use an example for recently that our head mechanic had mentioned is that brakes have gone up 3 times as much as they were last year. And we do use brakes. We have to replace the brakes quite often on the buses because there's a lot of stops. Those buses make a lot more stops than your car does. So
Hopefully.
yeah, exactly. So these are all some things like that really could be major when we talk about the budget this year. And hopefully all the puzzle pieces will all fit, but we'll probably be talking about all of these items. So just to show the sections of the budget that we'll actually be talking about, those of you last year that were on the board, we talked about these sections, the general support, all the business operations, legal, personnel services, data processes. So that general support section is a lot of different components that all add into the administrative portion of the budget. And one of the largest portions of the budget, the academic programs. So any instructional needs, including special ed services, from guidance services, all of those things all fit into that academic programs piece. Operations and maintenance, as we continue to see those costs rise, just to maintain our equipment, those things we have to consider in our budget. Transportation services, we see those things are going up. We do have more field trips and athletic events going on this year as compared to last year. So we noticed in the budget, if you look at the budget expenses from prior year, from the year 1920, from 2021, and from 21-22, those expenses were down. But while we've brought all of our programs back, those expenses are all going to be things that if we want to continue our programs, we're going to have to find ways to fund them. Employee benefits, as those continue to rise, and those are things that we don't really have control over. So those are all of those contractual obligations that we're tied to, along with debt. So our debts for maintaining our facilities, for building things like this auditorium, capital debt, and for bus debt, those things are all a part of what we're going to see in our contractual obligations that we're going to have to meet. So this is just a snapshot reminder of where our revenue sources come from for our budget. So this is the current school year's budget revenue that we talked about in our May budget. That somewhere around 46% of our budget is funded by property taxes, while the other 47% is state aid. So those two largest portions of our budget, and then we make up the difference or that gap from either fund balance or reserve funds. So that money that we save from year to year, we can actually put it forward towards the following year. So if we have a difficult budget year this year, it may be more of a challenge to fund that gap for the following year. So as we get closer into the budget season, we'll be able to project those numbers out so that we can actually assume that we'll be able to fill that gap. And other funds, that would also be like local grants, things like Medicaid costs or reimbursements, but that's a very small portion of the budget. This is a reminder of the reserve funds report that I gave recently back in September. This is the exact same report, just a snapshot of that report that I gave. So we do have about $5 million for our reserve for capital. That's for our capital project. So if you take that out, there's a lot less money in reserves. So we may be looking at the possibility of though digging into some of these reserves for a future budget if that gap comes about through the state aid. So just some facts about the 23-24 budget. We need to keep in mind that the federal stimulus money that came from the federal government is not part of our annual budget. It's not part of the general fund. It's actually a separate fund that we use to put towards programs that are, many of them are just one-hit things like upgrading technology, something that we weren't able to do with our general fund. And less than half of our revenue budget is funded by property taxes. So if we have a gap in state aid, somehow we have to fill that gap with property taxes. Inflation continues to be a concern, as it did last year when we were talking about the budget. It's like it hasn't stopped. So the gaps in state aid will need to figure out another funding source. So as we get numbers from the state, maybe even tonight, we'll be able to better project where we're going to be. The tax cap calculation will actually be discussed at the next board meeting because we have one board meeting in February. We'll be really nailing that number down on what we're going to do for our tax levy. So some of those numbers have already started to come into the calculation. I'm not able to finish the calculation until all of those numbers are put together. So as of right now, it looks like our tax cap could allow us somewhere around 3%, but I'm not totally sure yet. So those numbers, we'll talk about that at the February budget session and determine what our actual tax levy will be. The tax cap calculation, the initial submission is due on March 1st, as it is every year. And just an example of what our tax levy history has been for many years. In my position, I've never seen a budget go above actual 2% for our tax levy here in Dwaynesburg. So that seems to be our trend, that we carefully adjust our tax levy instead of throwing out a small number and then seeing a big spike a following year. Just a quick little example I put on the right-hand side there. So a house that's got a full market value of $300,000, if you put an actual 2% tax increase on that, you would see less than $100 on your tax levy increase for the following year. So that's just to kind of put it in perspective for what you might be looking at if we went up to that 2% number. So just things to keep in mind, that why we don't typically go out with a 0% tax levy increase. There was that one year back a few years ago when we did go out with a 0%, but that was because we only had
A 0.4
increase.
tax cap.
Which, tax cap, which amounted to about, I think it was like $38,000. So wasn't really going to give us a whole heck of a lot.
Yeah, I think just before you get started on this one, I just think it's important to recognize, because you'll see other school boards and other school districts talking about their budgets as well. And so you'll see some of them saying that they're going to go out at a 0% budget. And a lot of boards, actually, that's their mission, is to make sure that they go out at a 0% budget. There's a lot of different factors that go into making those kinds of decisions. And so I think Jeff's put up some on here. One thing that's important to remember is that our federal stimulus money was fairly modest, and suburban and urban districts that had kind of gotten the short end of the aid stick for a long time, those districts are getting, not only are they getting a lot more, they got a lot of federal funding, but they also got a lot of state funding last year and will this year, as the state makes good on its promise to fully fund foundation aid. So the other bit that I'll point out, and that I'll say it probably 100 times, is that it's important to make sure that when you are approaching taxes, that you're doing so incrementally. That's much more responsible than going out at 0 one year and then trying to exceed the cap the following year, because you need to make up some kind of gap. So some districts that shall remain nameless, I mean, we were talking about one of them that went out at 0 one year and then the following year went out at what?
It was over 30%.
Yeah,
But it was for several years of 0, so they had to make up for it somehow.
So it's impossible to get that back without really causing hardships on taxpayers in one fell swoop if you have a gap. And then the other thing that I believe it's important for is the predictability for family budgeting. If you have minimal incremental tax increases, that's easier to plan for than it is to plan for a 0 this year and then next year having to exceed the cap at like 9% or something like that. So sorry, Jeff, I took the first several bullets, but this is something that
I think you just covered this one. We're good.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other thing that's really important to note is that we have contracts that do increase every year. So in addition to inflation and all the other things that Jeff's talking about, our contracts go up but on an average of about 3% per year for every one of our contracts. And so those are going to increase whether we find the revenue to pay for them or not. And so we have to make sure that the revenue's there to pay our bills and to pay the people that work here so that we don't have to cut our way out of financial problems too.
I will say, unfortunately, some of the increases we've seen are large portions of our budget. Like insurances are, it's a good example of why, of those larger increases that are much above 3%. We've seen both our health insurances and our building insurances go up at rates higher than 3% a few times. So we need to be prepared for that too and keep that in mind that could happen again. Cyber insurance is another thing that we have to carry now, and that'll continue to grow with all the other cyber risks that we have. So it's something also that is tied to that increase. Some other important facts. This monitor keeps flipping off on me. The tax cap is not actually a cap for the individual school tax bill. So an individual should always keep in mind that your actual tax increase could be affected by your assessment values and any local tax rates in your town. So individuals, we have a few different towns that we tax within the Duanesburg Central School District. So some people might actually go up and down. There was one year where we said we're going out with an increase, and one of the taxpayers reached out and said this can't be right, and their taxes actually had gone down because of an assessment value and the town's equalization rates. So it's just sometimes you'll see those fluctuations depending on what happens with the town. So the tax cap does not limit how much the tax levy can actually increase. The district can propose a higher rate, but of course we would have to ask the community to obtain a 60% approval instead of a 51. So under a contingent budget, there can be no increase to the tax levy. So a 0% increase means that we would be forced to look at some serious cuts to the budget and probably looking at cutting programs that we provide to students. The law that restricts the 2% cap or lower is based on inflation. So this year, it is assumed that because the inflation rate is so high, we will see a 2% cap. It will actually be 2%. So it's that 2% tax cap is just an actual part of the several part calculation. So this is just a look back at the state aid for the past 9-10 years. And historically, foundation aid has increased at less than 3%, while the 21-22 school year and this 22-23 school year, we did see a 3% increase because of the state's guarantee to give us back our foundation aid. The state aid is needed, though, to address our inflation concerns more than ever this year. And we will continue to use things like using BOE services because we do get some of that back in expense-based aids. So some of those expense-based aids would be BOCES, technology, some technology, library services, and transportation. This is a look at our expenditures versus revenue. Again, this is just looking at, if you look at the 2020 and the 21 school year, you'll see that the total expenditures were kind of down from where they could have been in projection, and then increased again for the 21-22 school year. So again, I think at the end of this school year, or as we get closer, we're going to start to see those expenses for this 22-23 school year. They are going to be quite higher. So increasing the budget last year for this year has definitely, it'll help us to get through the year and to be able to continue to provide a program. and a look at our budget pass rates. So we've, for many years, been at 60% or higher. You can see we've had a couple years where it's fluctuated a little bit, but for the most part, has stayed at 60%, between 60% and the 78%. So the next time we talk will be on February 15th, and we'll talk about general support, athletics, technology, extracurricular things, and the tax cap. That is it. Questions?
So at these sessions, yeah, so this is a good opportunity to ask questions about what you've seen now. So this is kind of our table of contents of the budget, just the different parts of it. And then each one of the meetings coming up will focus on a specific part of the budget. Some parts will repeat over and over again, but mostly we'll stick to the just the section of the budget that we're focusing on. So, but does anybody have any questions for me or for Jeff about the overall budget, the different pieces and parts of it? Anything we can answer now?
Just a quick question, Jeff. It's really more of just to clarify for everyone.
Sure.
You mentioned that as one of the hurdles is a potential fiscal cliffs, but I know that we prepare for them because I know we talked about them ad nauseum.
We do, and we've
that
done
we
a
don't
really
want to find ourselves at the edge of a fiscal cliff. So maybe you could just speak briefly, because I know we'll get into the weeds about it in the upcoming meetings, but just that I feel that our district does a good job of protecting us from that very scary thing.
I feel that this slide right here actually kind of highlights that. So we've taken our end of the year funds. You know, we've done a good job at budgeting, and because of that, we finished the year in the black, right? So we're able to take some of our savings and put it away so that we can be prepared for that fiscal cliff, so that we can be prepared that if the state says, you know what, we're having a difficult time this year, we're going to take away money, because there was that time back in 2010, I think it was.
Yep, that they took back.
That they took that back, and you know, they said, oh well, you're allowed to get this much, but we're going to actually take some of that away, and you actually are only getting this much.
Yep.
So the fact that we've been able to save in our reserves and we don't spend it all has helped us to prepare for that very moment. That if they tell us, you know,
I think that what you'll see probably starting this year is school districts that maybe use their federal stimulus funds to hire. A lot of people are going to face that cliff a little bit sooner because they have reoccurring costs. So when the federal stimulus funds are gone, they'll still have those costs that they have to come up with in their regular budget. So we haven't done that. We've bought one-time goods, so one-time money. You buy one-time things. And what you will see though, so this year's budget isn't really the concern primarily right now. We're really concerned about next year and how things are going to look, especially with that change in aid formula and a lot of other factors. So we shall see.
Welcome.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Sure.
Is it on? Oh. I'm just wondering, when we talk about the budget and if there, expenses go up in one category and we have to readjust for that, why are we always talking about cutting instructional programs? Like, can we go to the budget and look at some of the other budget lines and say, okay, well, maybe we need to reassess how much we're actually putting in this fund for a later date, because we really need to keep these instructional programs up and running.
Yep.
So is that something that as a board we can explore a little bit more than just saying we're going to cut this academic program?
Yep, we do that every year. So we do look at all the different expenses in the budget, not just instructional programming. The reason why it gets brought up a lot is because, I don't know, what percentage of our budget is for instructional costs, Jeff? Very high percentage.
It's a very high percentage. I'm sorry, I can't come up with
so
a
the
number for you,
vast
but
majority of our budget is spent on teachers, right? On teaching staff, aides. And so when we're talking about making meaningful cuts, the only thing that there really is to do is to reduce instructional programming, because that's where all the money is. So a lot of, and you'll see,
There's some lines there that I think that a little bit more gets saved year over year that maybe could be discussed.
yep, and that's what this process is for. And so we'll look through all those carefully to make sure that those are right. But yeah, the vast majority of the money is there. And when you're looking to cut things like a percentage, so you're really looking to cut teachers when you have things like $100,000 to come up with, because you're just not going to supply cut your way out of things like that. It's really HR that you're looking at. But yeah, we'll look at all those things
Let's
too.
look at some of the other options that we might have available. I think that might be good.
I look
we
forward to
don't-
your insights on that, Sarah.
Awesome, let's do it.
Yep.
Anybody else have questions?
So I'm just trying to wrap my head around all this because I was reviewing it again last night. So if we didn't have the $6 million capital project fund, would there still be a tax levy?
The
Yes.
yeah.
But I mean, if
They don't really have it. The two don't really have anything to do with each other. So the capital reserve is made up of the fund balance that we have left over. So still, though, you can use that for capital projects. You can't use it for everything. So those reserves have limited utility. So if you look at Jeff's list of reserves, so those are the categories of things that we have money in. You couldn't use, capital reserve funding to come up with some money for the instructional program. It's specifically for the capital. It's for the capital plan.
okay, but he had said on this slide specifically that if we need to take excess money, it would have to come from one of these reserves, correct?
So things like retirement, so if our retirement goes up, if we have to fund that gap with retirement, so we have retirement contributions reserve, we have TRS retirement reserves. So the TRS actually just started a few years ago. They just allowed us to actually start that. So that's another thing that if we have a gap and it looks like our retirement fund our retirement expenses are going to go up at a substantial rate, then definitely that would be something to look at as a possibility of pulling money from that account to fund the general budget with that reserve fund. If unemployment was through the roof, then maybe looking at that unemployment reserve would be something that we want to look at.
What percentage of the budget do we pull from? We account for some of that in the budgeting process, though, right, Jeff?
Yep. So that would be around that 5% increase for between either fund balance and reserve. So if we're able to save from the prior year, we're able to roll over the savings from the prior year and fund that gap. And then if we still have a gap, then you either talk about cuts or you can fund it with the reserves if you're comfortable with using that reserve fund to fund that gap. And in some cases, we don't spend it all. So it goes back into the reserve. So the reserve fund is the last thing that we're going to tap into. So last year we had funded the budget with the TRS, or I'm sorry, with the ERS reserve, $100,000 we put in the budget. So if we don't touch that, it'll stay there. We won't have to touch it. And then we can roll it and move forward. But if we have a difficult budget year, I mean, expenses are higher this year because of everything. So we may be digging into the budget, the revenue budget, a little bit more than what we have in years prior. So
here's my next question. So because we received the worst case scenario for the capital project, the $6 million, as far as what needed to be fixed by the company that's doing the construction and everything on the buildings for the capital project. So, hold on, I'm trying to get my thoughts together. So if there's any money left over from that, what would happen to that excess money? It would just stay in that same pot of money?
So okay, so the last capital project we had less than $100,000 that we had remaining in the budget after the $18 million capital project.
Okay.
So, yeah, it would roll back into into reserves or into fund balance.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
And you were talking about state aid and how we're wondering if that's going to get readjusted. Do we have any kind of idea or forecast as to what we may be receiving in the next school year? Are we talking like 5%, 15%?
No, so it's probably closer to 2%,
Okay.
at least in foundation aid. So what we don't know yet is the expense-based aid, so the aid that we get for buying BOCE services, transportation aid, stuff like that. We don't know what that's going to be, but it's going to be, we know that it's going to be a pretty modest increase, and we think it's going to be 2% only because the last run that came out was 2%. So we'll know soon what the executive budget projects us to get. But I bet you it'll be anywhere between that and 3%.
Okay, so we're looking at a modest increase, not a cut in our
We're-
aid.
This year, yeah.
Okay, but if you factor inflation, it's a cut.
It's
Is that what
it's
you're
still
saying?
lower than inflation.
Right.
You're
okay,
right.
I understand. Thank you.
Anybody else? Thanks, Jeff.
Okay.
Next item, presentation and approval of prior Board of Education meeting minutes. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the meeting minutes from the December 2022 meeting as submitted. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Teresa. Second?
I'll second.
Melissa, thank you. Questions or comments? Okay, remember, not everybody was there, so if you didn't attend, you shouldn't vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Yep. Moving on to Board of Education Standing Committee reports. Audit Committee?
I have not met.
Okay. Building and Grounds.
Have not met.
And last but not least, Policy.
We have not met either.
Okay. Moving on to financial items. Accept financial and external audit reports. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the claims auditor's reports dated December 22, 2022. General warrant A21 in the amount of $102,863.75. Capital warrant HP9 in the amount of $11,874. Bus warrant HB3, $239,414. General warrant A22, dated January 4, 2022, in the amount $380,143.74. Treasurer's report ending November 30, 2022, and the external audit reports, audited financial statements, as provided and recommended by the Treasurer and Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Francis, thanks. Second? Tony, thank you. Questions or comments?
Jeff, on the bus thing, just more because I'm curious than anything, what's like the timing on those? I say we purchased 2 there. I assume they're shorter ones, but they're relatively cheap. Like, are those, like, we're putting down deposits, or are those buses that were approved by the voters last term and we're finally accepting delivery on?
Those are buses that we owe payment on, because so every year we get when we do the bus borrowing, we borrow them for 5 years. So that's just our bond payments back for those buses.
Cool. Thank you.
So it's not from the ones that are recent; it's from prior years.
Awesome.
Any other questions? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next item, accept contract with Walsh and Walsh. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the bond council contract between Walsh & Walsh LLP and Dwaynesburg Central School District for services in connection with the reconstruction and improvement of various school district facilities for the approved capital project as recommended by the Assistant Superintendent of Management Services. This contract shall not be binding on the parties until authorized and signed by each party's respective representatives. Do I have a motion? Melissa, thank you.
I'll second.
Teresa, thanks. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, next item. Approve capital project bond resolution. Bond resolution dated January 10, 2023. A resolution authorizing the issuance of serial bonds of the Dwaynesburg Central School District, Schenectady, Albany, Montgomery, and Schoharie Counties, New York, in an aggregate principal amount not to exceed $28 million to finance the reconstruction and improvement of various school district facilities, and delegating the power to issue bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the sale of such bonds to the President of the Board of Education. And the remainder of this item as listed. Do I have a motion?
A motion.
Francis, thank you. Second? Tony, thanks. Questions or comments?
I just wanted to just be really clear about Section 2. So in Section 2, that's where we're talking about the expenditure of the capital reserve funds. So when we went out to vote, we had voted with the intent to say that we would be doing a $28 million project, and $6 million of that $28 million would come from capital reserve funds. I just want to make sure that everybody knows that as part of the budget process, we'll talk about the propositions that are going to be on the budget, and there's usually a proposition for transportation purchases, but also there'll be a proposition to expend that money from the capital reserve for the capital project. So I just wanted to make sure that everybody wasn't surprised when later on we talk about that proposition. If we had, I don't know, I guess there was a way to incorporate that proposition into the capital project vote that we just had. And so that's something that we'll probably do for any future capital projects, but because we didn't do that, we have to do it on the budget.
Okay, questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Next item, approved tax collection stipend. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby approves payment of the tax collection stipend for the remainder of the year to be prorated to Michelle Hundley as per the Dwaynesburg Support Staff Association Agreement Amendment dated October 11, 2022. Effective with the start date of February 1, 2023 of the 2022-2023 school year. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Avis. Second?
I'll second.
Melissa, thank you. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Last financial item. Approve capital project fee amendment number 1. Recommendation that the Board of Education hereby accepts the recommendation of the Assistant Superintendent of Management Services to approve the amendment to the Professional Services Agreement number 1, G802-2017, for the 2022 capital project as per attached documentation. Do I have a motion? Tony, thank you. Melissa, will you second?
Sure.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments on this one? Go ahead.
So can you just clarify if I'm reading this correctly? There's an adjustment of 1.7 million that's going to be added to our financial responsibility for the project from McGraw-Hill? Or, I'm
So-
sorry, McGraw.
So the original contract that was approved a percentage, and now that we have a past capital project, that's the actual dollar amount that goes toward them. So that's what it's amended with, is the actual dollars and not the percentage. Is that right?
So originally, we had started out with Ashley McGraw at a $25 million number
Okay.
and ended up with 28 million. So that's why we're seeing that amendment based on their percentages. They had to adjust that
Okay,
cost.
so because we went from 25 to 28 million,
so
this 1.7 million is that difference in increase from the architectural firm?
it's a total, yeah.
The total increase, not that in addition to the past one.
Okay, I guess I don't know, what are we comparing it to? I didn't have a document of what I was comparing it to, so it was a little bit confusing as to know where that number is actually originating from.
You'd have to go back to when that original agreement was made.
I wasn't here.
The other agreement is it's in the attachment.
I think there's one dated 2019.
Yep, that's the third attachment.
It's based on this construction cost right here, and that's where they pulled that from. So and also when we did our RFP, we were also at 25 million, so that's where that number comes from. So that's what our total is going to be for phase 1 and phase 2. No, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I'm really not sure where you're at, Jeff. I'm just trying to have this make sense.
They're making the adjustment based on, like, it's not an additional 1.7 million. They're saying that's the total.
Okay, so there's a breakdown between the English and the math language here, is that maybe? Because it says adjusted contract amount.
So the total for phase 1 and phase 2.
Right, yep, I understand if we add those together, we get that adjusted contract number, but again, I'm just not sure what I'm comparing it from.
I just think that when we had the agreement with the architect, we didn't have all of the pieces scoped out, so they didn't know how
I'm sorry, I
much.
can't hear you, Jim.
They didn't know how much the design portion was going to be when we entered into contract with them, and now we do. So the voters have approved that. And so I'm not really sure how to answer your question.
I guess I just want to know where 1.7 million came from. Like, what was the originating number and agreement, and how did we get to this 1.7?
The document that we're proposing here is, Scott, it says, so it was the fees were based on calculated on percentages. So that's when their original proposal was based on percentages, and we didn't have a total for our capital project at that time.
Do you remember when the architects and our construction manager presented
Yes.
Fees, and they had a breakdown of all the different estimates for all the different pieces of the capital project?
Sure.
So they weren't able to determine an actual dollar amount until that work was done, until we had a final dollar amount made. It was just a percentage. So now that we've had a capital vote, it's based on that amount that was approved by the voters. So, and does that answer your question?
Not really. I mean, I see where you're coming from, but it's a little muddy. I just want to make sure that, like, I understand what I'm supposed to be voting on. And this is a little,
So from what I'm understanding is back in 2019, it was originally $25 million, but probably because of inflation and everything, it went up to 28 million.
It was before we had even scoped out any of the project. When we entered into this contract with them originally, it was before we knew what the project would be. And it was also before we knew how big of a project we could do and still get aided on. And we didn't have a good sense of what our actual debt picture would look like either. So the initial contract is based on a percentage of a project that
doesn't
was
exist
around.
yet.
That's right.
It's really conceptual.
Right.
And it doesn't really solidify until the voters approve a dollar amount, and then they can actually make the calculation.
I will also
That's
say
the way I
that,
understand it.
I will also say that this is a capital project expense, and we are restricted to not expend over that $28 million for our capital project. So no matter what our expenses, no matter what our expenses are for your architect, no matter what, we can't go over that $28 million, and we're capped at that. So they also realize that if we pay them too much, we can't do construction, and therefore they probably won't be around the next time. So their rates are going to be good.
I don't know if this is, I'm thinking of it in terms of like, I'm going to redo my bathroom. Yeah, these are the things I would like to have done. This is the amount of money that I'm thinking that we need. I'm telling the contractor what I would like done, and they're coming back and saying, okay, great, we can do this project for you. But now that you're telling us your ask list or things that we've looked around the school and seen that need to be done, then this is what we can do. So we've approved this amount. I know I only have this amount in the bank, so I can't go over that. So I think that's how I'm understanding it. Is that?
Yeah, that's pretty close.
Okay, that's how I'm understanding. Okay, I think I'm just hung up on the adjusted contract amount. Like, if it's adjusted, what's it adjusted from? Yeah, I'm going back to some math. It's like I wanted this certain bathtub, and now this bathtub costs more.
We think we need roofs, and we think we need playground, we think we need X. Like, okay, that'll be about.
So essentially, this is adjusted from just like an estimation, a fictitious number.
A round number, and it's adjusted from a percentage to an actual dollar amount.
In 2019, we had to agree to a number.
Which was a percentage and not a number.
Right.
Is that what we're saying? Okay. All right.
There-
Thank you. I
yeah,
think I've got it. It just wasn't as black and white as I would have.
Crazy. It's not,
Okay.
there's no money. I mean, there's money.
Mm-hmm.
All right, how do you have enough information?
I think that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a
Tricky.
very tricky thing. Anyone else have any questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on to other. Approved 2023-2024 budget planning calendar. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the 2023-2024 budget planning calendar as recommended by the superintendent and assistant superintendent of management services. Do I have a motion? Thank you. And a second.
I'll second.
Thank you. All right. Next. Oh, I got questions or comments. I'm getting ahead of myself here. Any questions or comments? All right, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. Now, next item. Approve Committee on Special Education minutes. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the recommendation of the CSE meetings and their minutes from the December 1921, from the December 19th and 21st, 2022, and January 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 9th, 2023 meetings. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Thank you. And thanks. Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Moving on to personnel. Accept resignations. Recommendation that the Board of Education accept the following resignations. For retirement, Maria Helaz, special education teacher, effective June 30, 2023. Robert Miltner, special education teacher, effective January 6, 2023. And Valerie Shermer, kitchen helper, effective January 6, 2023. Do I have a motion?
A motion.
Thank you, Teresa. Second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Avis. Questions or comments?
Just a comment that Ms. Halas is a wonderful teacher. So I know we're still some months away from her retirement, but certainly do appreciate her service to our students. She's an amazing teacher.
I agree.
Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Approve appointments. Recommendation that the Board of Education approve the following appointments as recommended by the superintendent and athletic director. All appointments are employees at will. An appointment at this time does not guarantee employment for the entire school term or year. ECA appointments are for the applicable 2022-2023 school year and sports season, beginning with preseason practice and ending at the conclusion of the season, including sectional play. And the names and titles are as listed. Do I have a motion?
A motion.
Melissa, thank you. Second? Sarah, thank you. Questions or comments?
I have a question. So we have one person being approved, about being BOCE's screen substitute. Then we have a substitute teacher and a substitute teacher that's uncertified. So where are the other substitutes coming from, and are they screened? I know they're screened, but like, what's going on there? Can you explain?
So we actually have discontinued the BOCES subservice.
Okay.
And so they had been doing our screening for us, and now we're doing the screening locally instead.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain. I have to abstain.
Can I just add a comment? I'm sorry. I'm just glad to see that Carl Breitenstein is going to be assistant wrestling coach. I think he'll bring a lot to that program, and he was really good in his day.
All right, moving on to the final personnel item. Approve appointment D. Cannon. Be it resolved that the Board of Education hereby accepts the recommendation of the superintendent to approve Deborah Cannon to a 4-year probationary appointment as a special education teacher in the special education tenure area, Master's Step 16, commencing February 13, 2023, and ending February 12, 2027, contingent upon compliance with the requirements of education law. Do I have a motion?
I'll motion.
Thank you, Avis. And Francis, will you second?
I'll second.
Thanks. Questions or comments?
Is this our secondary?
Secondary.
All right.
Anyone else? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. Moving on to an informational item on the 2023-2024 draft school calendar.
So this is just to look at again. So there's a couple of differences between this calendar and calendars in the past that I wanted to just point out. One being that the year starts out with 2 conference days before the first day of school. And then also there are 3 half days that are built into the schedule, one in December, one in January, one in May on budget vote day. And so those half days will be used for staff development, additional staff development, planning time. And that one in May on the budget day, it's really something that we probably should do that this year also, because it is difficult to do a vote when you have school in session at the same time. And so this will kind of prevent that. that from occurring next year. The other thing that's not on here is it says June 27th graduation. So next year, the year goes pretty late. So one of the things that Jody and I had talked about was possibly doing graduation on the Wednesday, which seems weird because it's Wednesday. But it is the teacher's last day, and it's good for, it's, if you did it on the 28th, it'd be hard to get kids to come back for rehearsal, and also it'd be less convenient for teachers to just stay through to graduation. And so probably the graduation will be on that Wednesday, the 26th. But it's a very long year, goes very late into June.
Can I just ask Jim what made it land that way this time?
Just the holidays and just how they fall and the number of days that we're required to have, and where the regents exams are. So the state sets where the regents exams are and what the rating day is.
Right.
And the rating day is on the 26th. So that it's getting harder and harder to get 180 days into a school calendar, especially because it was harder this year. Like this year, we only had 3 snow days to give. Next year, we do have a couple. We have 4 built in there, which is a little bit more comfortable. But yeah, it's just kind of different every year.
Okay, so you put 182 days for the next one just because it made sense due to the regents instead of just 180?
Yeah, so there's extra days built in for snow days and emergencies and stuff like that.
Oh, that encompasses the snow days?
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
So there's good question. So there's 180. Yeah, so it gives you a little bit more wiggle room in terms of snow days, but you could actually take a couple of days out someplace if you wanted to. Like there's a day.
You just can't cut it shorter because of the regents?
You can't. Yeah, you can't end it earlier, but you could if you wanted to add a holiday in March or something like that, you could add an extra holiday. We do have a snow day give back day that we are doing this year, and we'll do in the future too. I'm gonna. This isn't totally final yet, just because there's a day that's coming up in February where all the superintendents from around the area are getting together and comparing our calendars, just to make sure that they somewhat align, because our staff lives in different districts, and so this affects them too. But yeah, if you see anything on here, now is a good time to ask about it so that we can get it fixed before you have to vote on the calendar. So I'll probably ask you to vote on the calendar at the February meeting.
I'm unhappy how early April break is.
It is very
I'd like
early.
you to move it later in that month so the weather's nicer. My
That's very
camper's
early.
barely ready to get out the first week of April.
That's why we.
That's early.
So I'm going to need you to travel back in time and change the calculation when Easter happens.
Okay.
That is interesting. Why is it at that time and not
It's
around
Easter.
Easter?
Easter.
That is Easter that
Easter.
year. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments? Okay. Next is a motion to move to executive session. We're going to, the proposal is to enter into executive session to discuss personnel issues and student records. Do I have a motion? Francis, thank you. Melissa, will you second?
I'll second.
We already got that.
Okay.
Questions or comments? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, for the public, we will be going into executive session, and when we come out, we'll be ending the regular meeting, so there won't be any more business conducted. Thank you very much.
you.